Oh my gosh, so silly. Thank you
Yeah, it's good.
for all of
Thank you,
you.
Nina.
Okay, feels like a Monday morning. So sorry. Thank you, everyone. Well, at least we've proven that all of you know how to use the questions field. Sorry about that. So let's start this off again. Thanks to all of you who have joined. Today's session is particularly oriented for those of you CVE, so I believe that's a term. Anywho, so yeah, today's session has been tailored for the CVE folks in particular. It's going to be a bit shorter than the other sessions were, so 45 minutes of scripted content. And in that content, we're going to be talking about some of the basics when it comes to working with Gmail, so Google Mail. Then we're going to talk about Google Hangouts, which is Google's chat messaging, so instant messaging tool, talking about chat for colleagues. Google Contacts for things such as creating your own personal contact group for reaching out to a bunch of people at once. Then I'll touch upon some of the basics with scheduling with Google Calendar. And lastly, and woven throughout this entire webinar, are some notes that are particular to those of you who have VPN access and what you can and cannot expect G Suite to work with when you're in the VPN. So, that being said, as we go through this session, I think you've all discovered this when I was on mute, but feel free to use the GoToWebinar control panel to type in any questions you have during the session. So the first 45 minutes, feel free to attend as we're talking over these different features. You can type your questions in at any time. But also, if you have any questions that I don't cover after that first 45 minutes, I will be sticking around for the entire 90-minute window for you to ask me any other questions that are on your mind, and I'd be happy to walk you through. So today's session is really all about you, especially since it's our last webinar together. Okay, yes, that's it. So in that case, I'm going to close this down. I will turn off my webcam so you have more room to see the screen. And lastly, yeah, Patrick pointed out that please feel free to leave after the 45-minute mark. So that's after the quote-unquote scripted or pre-planned content. After that, it's really just a free-for-all. So questions, ad hoc questions, if you want to talk with me, figure out a specific workflow, I'm happy to stick around, but you are free to leave and go about your day. So thanks for the clarification, Patrick, and yes, indeed, please feel free. Okay, so I am starting off here. I'm already logged into my GCC work inbox. Hopefully those of you who are chiming in from your desks, or tuning in I should say, you are able to follow along with me. Now, before, in my previous webinars, I was using Chrome as my browser, but today I'm using Firefox as my browser. I just learned that that's been approved for VA folks, so that's great. However, do you know that it also works perfectly fine if you only have access to Internet Explorer? So what I'm trying to show here is by using Firefox is that the G Suite experience is very similar between Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, all of these modern browsers. There are just a few differences when it comes to clicking and dragging is what it comes down to. So I'll talk to the differences between the Chrome and the non-Chrome experience for you. All right. Okay, so also before we get started, I also want to quickly bring Patrick's awesome GCC Employee Private Portal to your attention. So this is a Google site that GCC's IT department, possibly Patrick himself, has designed, and it's full of fabulous information that you can reference later if you have any questions about particular departments, new workflows that are possibly introduced now that you've gone Google, and also a lot of Google Learning resources. So for example, Patrick, feel free to chime in at any time if I'm botching up your masterpiece here, but just to start, on this home page, probably the most important thing that I could say is that right here you have the ability to view those webinars that have been recorded. So this one's also being recorded if you need it for further reference. You also have a company calendar that's going to be updated with lots of details that are relevant. company announcements and whatnot. Scrolling up to the top, you also have a new GCC directory page. Oops, clicking on that. So before this apparently was difficult to sort or view or interact with. Now they've got it so that the entire directory is here, as you can see, and each column has the ability to sort it in different orders. So hopefully you find this easy to interact with. I think that this looks and works great. Scrolling up to the top, you also have different corporate pages. So you can see that different departments are listed here. If you have permission to access one layer down, you'll see that there's a restricted page for each department. These are limited to particular people who have extra permissions to view these documents. Your timesheets can be found here as well, so that's something that's also woven in. And then particularly on the topic of G Suite, this Help tab will lead you to a lot of additional resources, videos, online resources, support documentation that have to do with getting you all configured and comfortable in your new Google world. So things such as iPhone or Android setup, how to chat, etc. So Patrick, feel free to type in your feedback since I know you're at home and would prefer to stay offline if there's anything else you'd like me to cover.
Thanks, Nina. That was great. The only other one or two things I may highlight is if you'd hover over the Help button and then show that first item underneath the Quick Start, and it's also called the Top 10 Things. If you click on that, if folks are lost and click on nothing else, I think this is probably their best bet for getting going right away, super fast, up and running with Google. It shows you the main 3 buttons you need to keep an eye on to get around the interface, and then the top 10 things, and there's actually 11, so one's a bonus, way down at the bottom, but I wanted to keep it to a top 10 list. The top 10 or 11 things to help you get your interface all squared away to do the work for you as fast as possible. The other thing I'd mention on this page up close to the top again on the right side is after we take the webinar links off the main page, they kind of become old news after a month or so. They'll always be here for our new users. Whenever new folks get hired, they'll always be able to come in here and click on those webinars for, forever and ever. They'll be here ready for folks' help. So this is probably the one stop where new folks, either to the company or to just using Google, even if you've been around the company, this would be your first stop. The other resource I wanted to point out was under contract pages. These will be also restricted pages like Nina showed you under corporate pages. And the idea here is we still haven't fleshed this out totally, but each contract will have their own little web page to come to for announcements and things going on particular to that contract. If Gary and Terry want to use this, they'll have access to it. They'll be able to edit it and update it. It's just an idea right now, but anyone on the CVE contract would be able to click that. So go ahead, and I put you on that too, Nina. I think you should be able to get in there. And right now it's just a shell, but Gary might say, hey, I put it on our web page. Go check it out. So this is where you would come and how you would get there. So I think that does it. Thanks so much, Nina.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Okay, so now that you've been introduced to the portal, note that you can also access your mail by going to a specific GCC domain. So that would be, that was mail. Actually, I want to be correct here. Okay, so this email tab leads to it. Oh gosh, doesn't show the hyperlink. Anywho.
Yeah, it's just mail.gcctechllc.com.
Perfect, okay. I thought that was it, but anyway. So I had gone to that and I'm logged in. And now I'm going to kick off today's webinar by going through a brief walkthrough of the components that you see here in your initial inbox view. So again, feel free to type in questions at any point. And in the lower left corner, just to start off, in the lower left corner, this is where Google Hangouts lives. So as you can see, I've had some chats with Daniel, Travis, and Patrick. Google Hangouts is an easy way for you to click this little plus icon, type in the colleague of your choice, so this will pull up the directory. So Marty, here we go. If I wanted to call you out, Marty, and have a quick instant message conversation with you, I could select your name and then give you a little chat message. Okay, so I'll be walking through some more options with that a little bit later. But right above Google Hangouts is where you'll find your label list. And in Google, one of the things that's a big adjustment for a lot of people is that Google doesn't actually have anything called folders. It has labels. So all the older folder system and subfolder system that you used to have within Outlook, now it's been brought over into Google and converted into labels. And some of you should see a situation where maybe you have an underscore inbox followed by some sub-labels that represent the older subfolders you used to have. Now there is a particular way you can deal with this. However, if you see this, please do not touch this quite yet. You have to wait for the green light from Patrick. But I'll talk to you in more detail about how labels specifically differ from folders and hopefully give you a bit of encouragement that labels may in fact be even more fun to work with than folders. In the upper left corner, we have two interesting things here. First of all, we have the big red Compose button. If you give that a click, it opens up a new message window, and I'll be demoing some few interesting and fun features that Gmail has built in when you're sending mail. Okay, in the top corner, you have the Mail drop-down. So you can click on this and then toggle between Mail, Google Contacts for things such as viewing the directory and adding or deleting certain contacts, merging contacts, etc. And then you also have a little known tool called Google Tasks, which is basically Google's version of keeping a to-do list. So feel free to play around with that. At the top of your inbox, you have a search bar. So classic Google is best at search. You can type in any keyword, lots of different search queries, but one of the major differences between searching in Gmail and searching in Outlook is that Google doesn't actually use sorting in order to search. However, before you feel alarmed, do know that actually Google has a lot of very powerful options for you to search. So I'll show you how you can kind of get used to that new world where you don't sort, but instead you search for specific people. Over on the right-hand side, we have some more interesting and important icons, as Patrick pointed out in the GCC portal. So you first of all have this thing that looks like a waffle. If you give this a click, this is the Google Apps product grid, and it's going to be the easiest way for you to bounce between different G Suite tools relevant to your work. So in your case, since VPN does not seem to work with Drive and Docs and Sheets at this point, for most of you, it will be the way that you can bounce between your inbox, Gmail, and Google Calendar. In the upper right corner, you have the initial or circle with your initial in it. If you've been proactive, maybe you have a profile picture there already. But this is how you can click and confirm that you are indeed signed into your GCC Tech LLC work account, which is reassuring for those of you who have been working with Gmail for your personal email account. And then last but not least, for those of you who are following along with me, I really encourage you to follow along with me for this next step. I am going to kick this off by clicking on this settings gear and dropping down into our Gmail settings so that I can really configure how my inbox should look, act, and feel. Okay, so hopefully you're following along. And just a few settings that I want to point out today, particularly to adjust from the post-Outlook world. The first one is about a quarter of the page down. Actually, let me zoom in a little bit. Oh, it's already zoomed in. Hopefully you can all read. Yes, Patrick, I've seen your note and I was going to get to that. All right. So under the general chat, the first thing I want to bring up is Conversation View. Now in Google, if you haven't done anything yet, this is going to be on by default. And Conversation View is Google's way of grouping together messages that share the same subject line and recipients. So it's a kind of a way of reducing inbox clutter by grouping similar things together. But for some of you, this may be a very new way of organizing mail. So do know that you can turn this off and then your conversations will not be grouped. You'll see these messages listed out line by line. So I'm going to leave this on so I can demonstrate what it looks like. And then another thing I'd like to introduce to you that's very work-friendly, particularly those of you who are not, have typos and stuff, just like me. I make typo mistakes all the time. Undo send is a great feature that I recommend giving a shot. So I recommend enabling that. And then you have the option to set a cancellation period for up to 30 seconds, which I also recommend, just as you're testing this out. So undo send, if you turn this on, it's going to give you a good 30-second window, in my case, 30 seconds in which even after you push the send button and that message is in process of being sent to my recipient, I can cancel that send at any point in time and my recipient will have no clue that I even tried to send them anything at all. So that's great if I was trying to type an email to Patrick and instead of writing Patrick, I wrote Peter. I don't know, maybe it's a Monday, I'm tired. Then with undo send enabled, I could cancel that and Patrick would never know about my slip up. So really work friendly. Scrolling down a little bit more, under the general settings area, you also can find your signature. So if you haven't set this up already, note that you can copy and paste whatever signature you used to have in Outlook into this box. If you find that it didn't migrate over very smoothly for you, you can fix the formatting using these text options, etc. As you set your signature up, one thing that I recommend especially is checking this little box at the bottom of that signature area, because without it, Google puts 2 dashes ahead of your signature, and it also throws your signature beyond the last text in an email. So sometimes beyond do not print this email and this email is confidential if you might have a footer. So in order to get rid of those dashes and that weird location, check that box. The dashes will be taken away and then your signature will be at the end of your response where everyone expects to see it. At the very bottom of the general settings area, this is where you can find Google's version of Out of Office. And in Google, this is called Vacation Responder, as you can see. Now, like in Outlook, it's really simple to turn on and off, so I can turn this on, set the dates when I'll be out of office, and then include my message. Now, one of the primary differences between Outlook's Out of Office and Google's Vacation Responder is that with Google's Vacation Responder, you cannot differentiate messages between internal and external correspondence. It's just one message suits all. So I'll turn that off for now. And then next, bringing your attention back up to the settings toolbar, I would like to bounce over a few tabs over to the Labs tab. Now, there are a few labs that I like to recommend in all of our sessions. And in this case today, I'll introduce you to 2 in detail and then probably touch on a third one in the 45-minute Q&A session afterwards, since I've heard there are some questions associated with it. But so the first 2 labs I really want to focus on today, if you're setting this up for the first time, the first one will be down by the P's, so they're in alphabetical order. Keep your eyes peeled for a lab called Preview Pane. Now, Preview Pane, as you can see in this thumbnail here, it's a lab that really kind of allows you to reorganize your Gmail inbox in a way that is more Outlook-like. So in this thumbnail here, you see this is the label list on the left. In the center, you have your messages stacked up. And if you were to select a message, then you can read its contents off to the right in a little window. So if you find yourself missing the way Outlook looked, then I recommend enabling this, and I'll show you how to work with it. Scrolling all the way down to the bottom, close to the R's, another lab that might be fun for you to explore is right side chat. So I recommend enabling this. What this does is, particularly those of you who had lots of folders and subfolders and now find yourself with a very crowded label list, you might notice that Hangouts and their label lists are competing for space. So in order to help that, right side chat takes Hangouts from this little corner and actually moves it to the right side of your inbox. So that gives your label list more space and gives you more space to chat with your colleagues. So I'm going to turn that on and show you how that works. Okay. I will hit, sorry, the last lab that I wanted to deal with, but I will not be introducing, is canned responses. So that's going to be by the C's. I'm not going to be demoing it in our content today, but canned responses is great if you need to save off emails you send over and over again, so email templates, or if you have more than one signature. Scrolling down all the way to the very bottom, I'll hit Save Changes, our inbox will refresh, and our chat should be juggled around. Okay, here we go, right side chat showing up. Let's see, there we go, just took a second. All right, so now that my inbox has been reorganized with right side chat enabled, looks like preview pane is hard to view when you have right side chat enabled. Patrick, did you notice yourself that it's one or the other? Anywho.
I hadn't noticed that. I think they both should work at the same time. I'll run a little test here while you're talking, but yeah, we've had both going, so
yeah, okay.
Maybe just a refresh or something.
Yeah, I assumed that might be the case. Interesting. Maybe it's because I'm zoomed in, actually. Anyway, okay, so I may switch one or the other off in order to demo them both, but hopefully it shows up for both of you. First, I'm going to start off by demonstrating how you can interact with your mail. Now, as you can see, by default in Gmail, your messages are listed line by line, and any unread messages you have a white background and bold text. And read messages will have a gray background and unbolded text. If you click on a message in the default Gmail view, you'll notice that that email is now readable in an entire window all to itself. Now, if you don't like this method, and I'll quickly turn off right side chat to show you this, but I'll turn it back on. Okay. If you have enabled preview pane, oh, very strange. It's just not showing up. Okay, sorry. One moment. Maybe that just didn't save. Probably moving a bit too fast. Okay, Marty also reports preview pane has not been working for me either the past few days. Well, as far as I was aware, that is not a Chrome-specific lab, but it doesn't seem to be appearing in Firefox. So I'm going to have to look into that, unfortunately. How curious. Oh, and Marty's also using it on Chrome. Well, that is mysterious. Okay, so Patrick said that troubleshooting, if you disable both right side chat and preview pane and then turn on preview pane, it should work. Oh, you know what? It wasn't even enabled for some reason. How mysterious. All right. Thank you so much for the help. So Marty, I might have to work with you separately in order to figure out what your issue is. Perhaps it just hasn't been saving your preference for that lab. But either way, you can know that preview pane has been enabled, not because your inbox changes, but because you have a new little icon sandwiched between the settings gear and your arrows in the upper right corner. So once you have this, it looks like either a paragraph or a backwards American flag. You can click on the drop-down arrow on the side of that icon and then select vertical split for that Outlook style organization. Now that I've done that, you can see I have my messages lined up on the left And if I select a message that has a bit of back and forth exchanges with it, now I can view the contents of those messages off to the right. And since I've pulled up a message that has 3 replies associated with the subject line G Suite Update Alerts, this is a great example of conversation view. So as I mentioned before, that's Google's way of grouping together messages with the same subject line. Now with Conversation View on, you can collapse and expand particular messages message by message just by clicking. Or you can use that arrow with a box around it to collapse all and expand all messages with one click. As you're interacting with Conversation View, again, this is great for reducing inbox clutter and also seeing how a conversation has developed over time. So the original message, the oldest one, is anchored at the top, and the subsequent replies are listed below it. If you like to interact with a message that's sandwiched within these replies, so let's say at this point, at the second message, ooh, such a long message, I wanted to interject a response to Nina saying, "Great tip, thank you." You can interact with any of these individual messages by using these options in the upper right corner of your message of choice. So here I could select reply, I could click the drop-down arrow, reply to all, forward, other actions if I want. But clicking on that reply arrow, now I have a reply box right below that message to Nina. Oops, let me click in it. And then just reviewing the options in this reply box, you can always click on that little reply arrow to change the activity, edit the subject a bit further. And last but not least, as you're getting used to Conversation View and inserting responses in the middle of a conversation exchange, note you can always click on that ellipses to show the content that Google has trimmed from your view. So if you want to be certain as to exactly what your colleague will be receiving as part of this content, you can always view this and then edit it as necessary. Okay, so I'm going to discard this message, and I'm going to continue to talk about your options when composing mail. So I just showed you a snippet of what's possible, but in order to talk about the real meat and potatoes behind sending mail in Gmail, I'm going to click on the Compose button in the upper left, and I'll zoom in again so it's a bit bigger. Click on that Compose button in the upper left, and you'll see that a new message window appears in the bottom right-hand corner of my screen. I'm going to pretend to compose a message to Travis, and as you can see me typing, just TRA, a few keystrokes, and Google is actively trying to guess who within my contacts I'm trying to reach out to. So in this case, I haven't actually sent an email to Travis before. However, Google is still picking up that as opposed to Trezell or Tim, it's noticed that I've been CC'd on more emails with Travis than with other people starting with T, and so it's suggesting his name before others. So this autocomplete feature is really helpful, the guessing. And once I select that person, their email is now filled into the to-line for me. So that autocomplete is great, and autocomplete will be an action for you just even after you email somebody once. So all you need to email someone once, and Google is going to save that contact and then help you autocomplete it the next time you reach out. Okay, I'm going to continue on to write a silly little message to Travis. Another cool feature here in Gmail is, as I go to click send, maybe you'll notice the mistake I'm about to make. But luckily, even in Firefox and Chrome and Internet Explorer, no matter where you are or working out of, Google has this neat feature of reminding you if you've forgotten to attach a message. It says here, you forgot to attach a file. You wrote "see attached" in your message, but there are no files attached. Send anyway? Now, I'm noting this because in Gmail, the pop-ups are worded a bit differently than they were in Outlook. So before you go on autopilot and just say, okay, the pop-up, get out of my face, you should probably read this over and then click cancel. So before taking your action, read it over, because if I click cancel, then I actually have a chance to attach those attachments. And the neat thing about that feature is if you write see attached or I've attached or find attached and you haven't attached anything, Google will give you that warning. Now at this point, in order to attach some items, I can use the toolbar at the bottom of my new message window, specifically this familiar paperclip icon, to give that a click. And then my File Explorer will be pulled up on my computer and I can select the attachment of my choice. So here we have an Excel file. I'll hit Open, and now you can see that Google's loading it as a hard copy attachment at the bottom of my window, along with an indication of how much space it's taking up. Now Google does have a 25 megabyte limit to each email. So note that if you include attachments that exceed that limit, you'll have to split up your emails and attachments. Okay, so I do have undo send enabled, but I will just quickly send this message to Travis. Now you'll see that that message is being sent. Because I had set up undo send, I have a 30-second waiting period before my message actually goes out to Travis. And at any point within that 30-minute window, I could click undo, which I will today because I don't want to spam Travis. And now that I've canceled my send, it's been pulled back as a draft. So Travis has not received any indication that I just tried to send him a message, which is great, because that means I haven't spammed him with unnecessary mail. Now, in order to wrap up this new message, I don't want to email Travis after all, so I'm going to use the trash can icon to again discard my draft. Note, though, that if I was to use this X in the upper right-hand corner of my new message window, then this would close the window down, but it would still save it in my draft section. So I will discard it completely. Now you'll see that draft ticker has gone away. Okay, so at this point, the questions field is pretty quiet. Props to Marty for being so active. But aside from Marty, I'm wondering, does anybody have any questions at this point about sending mail or settings or anything else that I've touched upon before? Preview pane. Feel free to chime in with your questions at any point in time. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to talk about organizing your mail and how to use things like labels, archiving, trash, and more. If you're typing something lengthy, feel free to bring it to my attention by raising your hand. I don't want to cut you off. Otherwise, looks like there are no questions, so I will just turn off the preview pane for the time being so we can see a bit more space in our inbox. And let's talk about your options for organizing in Gmail. First of all, in order to get to your organizing options, you can either check a box next to a message of your choice in your inbox, or you can be reading a message. Either way, what you're keeping your eyes peeled for is this toolbar to appear at the top. And these are all your options for organizing mail. The first button at your disposal is this archive button. An archive in Gmail is definitely different than what archive was in Outlook, because in Gmail, archive is really a way for you to keep your inbox nice and tidy. So for example, I have some chats saved as line items in my inbox because the chat history is saved in case I want to search for it later. So if I wanted to clean up my inbox so that it only contains mail, I could select these messages, hit that archive button. They've been removed from my inbox, so it's a bit cleaner than it was before. But if I click on the More drop-down and view my All Mail section, you can see I can still find these chats. So when you archive a message, oops, I guess I missed this one. When you archive a message, it's taken out of your inbox and moved into this All Mail section. Now I'm going to continue to talk about use cases for archiving and how else you can use it, but that's essentially the gist of what it does. Next up on the toolbar, we have a report spam button. So Google spam filters are very strict. If you happen to catch anything sneaking through its strict spam filters, then you can use this button to report it. Post-migration, it is recommended to actually investigate what Google has been flagging as spam. So if you click on the More dropdown and click into your spam label, it's good to just take a review of what messages have been piling up here, if any, because sometimes we notice post-migration some messages can be inappropriately flagged as spam. Now, based on what you mark as spam or mark as not spam, Google does learn from your behavior. So if any messages accidentally have ended up in spam, you'll be able to select a box. There's going to be a not spam button, and Google will learn from the email address and the content of the message, and it will learn what is not spam to you and what is spam. So you can teach Google how to identify spam appropriately. Right next to spam, one to the right, we have the delete icon, so the trash can icon. And everybody is familiar with this icon, or tends to be. And no surprise, if you use this delete button, that message has now been taken out of my inbox, and looking beyond the More dropdown, it's been moved into my trash. Now, the difference between trash or deleting an item in Gmail versus deleting an item in Outlook is that the action of deleting messages in Gmail is a bit more serious. Because in Gmail, once you decide to delete a message, it's going to be taken out of your inbox, moved into trash, and here it starts a 30-day countdown between the date when you deleted the message. So it's the 9th. I deleted these 2 messages on February 9th. 30 days from now, these messages will be deleted forever. Let me re-emphasize that. Delete in Google means delete. So if you put items in your trash, they have 30 days there before Google deletes them forever. So what Google recommends doing, instead of using trash, if you ever will need to use a message later, rather than risking it being deleted forever, that's a great use case for using archive. Because typically people want to delete messages so that their inbox is less cluttered. However, archiving will keep a hold of that message indefinitely, whereas the delete button will actually delete that message after a period of time. And don't worry if you decide to get in the habit of archiving and then you end up with tons and tons of historical data, because G Suite actually comes with unlimited space. So we've seen it hold years and years and terabytes of data. One more option in the toolbar for you is this Move To dropdown. And Move To looks a bit like a folder. It's a little misleading, but it's an option for you to move a message out of your inbox and into one of these particular sections. So your older folders, subfolders that you used to have, you'll see them here as options. So if I wanted to move my Marilyn, this email from Marilyn out of my inbox into the Marilyn label, oh, wrong. Butterfingers there. Let me try that again. Move to Marilyn. It's been taken out of my inbox and looking in the Marilyn label. Oh, I forget what it was. I do believe it was this message. All right. And then last but not least, let me select this message to start. We have the labels dropdown. It looks a bit like a luggage tag. And if you click on this labels dropdown, you're going to see that all the older folders and subfolders you used to have are now available to you as labels, which you can select via checkbox and hit apply. Or in my case, I'd actually like to create a brand new label from this dropdown. And so this message has to do with learning materials. So I can make a a label that has gathered up all of the learning materials associated with G Suite training. So from this very drop-down, I'm going to go to the very bottom, hit Create New, and I'll create a new G Suite Learning Materials label. Now that I've done that, you'll see that the message has an actual label on it saying G Suite Learning Materials. And also, if you look over on the left-hand side in your label list, there is a new label here, G Suite Learning Materials. So it was spun up dynamically in the label list. If I click on this label to investigate, there I can find the same message. And from the perspective of looking in my label at this message, you'll see that I actually see now an inbox label. If I click and read this message to investigate a bit further, the truth is now this message has two labels on it, the inbox label and the G Suite Learning Materials label. This is really Google's way of letting me know that I can find this message in two places now. I can find it by looking in my inbox. Yep, there it is. And I can find this message by looking in my G Suite Learning Materials label. Now, you can apply up to 500 labels to a single message, which means that you can then find that message in potentially 500 different places. So just to reiterate this, I'm going to apply another label to this message. Maybe I also want to create a label in my inbox that has to do with all messages from Nina. So I'm going to hit Create. And now you can see that there are two labels visible, as well as a new Nina label off to the left in my label list. Now that I've set up these two labels, you'll see that they've come in as gray by default. However, if you'd like them to pop with some sort of color coding method, you can easily set that up by hovering over the label you'd like to color code, clicking on that drop-down arrow, hovering over label color, and then selecting the color of your choice. So we'll make that purple, and why not make Nina yellow? Now, one last use case about Google and applying labels. It's considered Google best practice to actually get into the habit of first labeling messages. So once you're reading your messages for the day, label them in areas where you feel like you can find them later. So if you're looking here, it will jog your memory. You could find this message. If you look in the Nina label, there you can find it. And once you've applied the labels so you know where you can find this message later, it's a great use case for using the archive button. Because since you've applied your label, now you can safely archive the message, aka take it out of your inbox. But note that archiving a message still preserves whatever labels you had applied. So in the G Suite Learning Materials label, I can still find that message, as could I in the Nina label. Not to mention, you're going to be able to find that message in All Mail, and the labels have been preserved, so as you're browsing through All Mail, which is kind of like that historical backlog, you'll see where you can find it as well. So, are there any questions at this point about labels and color coding labels and organizing labels? Just want to make sure that you're feeling confident with reorganizing your inbox. I do want to re-emphasize that for those of you who have this funny formatting with maybe an underscore inbox or underscore outbox with older folders of subfolders beneath your underscore inbox, do note that IT is going to provide a help sheet to assist those who experience this issue, but please do not modify this yourself. Okay. So there are not too many questions pouring in at all, which means that unless I see somebody type in a question, I'm going to continue on to talk about searching. Now, I'm looking in my inbox and I'm going to use the search bar at the top. And just as you might expect, after all, we all use google.com every day, Google's keyword search is fabulous. It's very strong. So if I wanted to search through my inbox for any term related to Google, Gmail is going to look through all of my messages, calendar invitations, Hangout chats that I've had. It's going to look through the subject line, the body of my messages, and even analyze all the attachments on my messages for that word Google. So in addition to using keywords, you can also use different search queries to get very specific with what you want to search for. So this differs from sorting because, as you may remember in Outlook, if I wanted to find a message from Patrick, for example, I would first select the From column header and then select P for Patrick. But in this case, Google has some different options. Firstly, if searching for Patrick and searching for his email address, it gets me pretty close to that desired result, so know that you can search for email address. But for specifically messages from Patrick, what you'll do is you'll type in from, colon, then Google's suggesting who I want to reach out to, so that point I'll select Patrick. And then all the calendar invitations, Hangouts, emails that Patrick has sent me will show up in the search results. Now, for those of you who are maybe not quite used to those search queries, so in addition to the from, there's a to search query, there's a subject colon search query, depending on what you want to search for. These are hard to memorize and get used to at first, so note that in the beginning, feel free to also check out your search options with this drop-down arrow in the search bar. When you give that a click, you'll see that there's this new message window or not message window, but drop-down window that appears. And here, Google gives you some search fields for you to use as aids. So all messages from Patrick, maybe they contain the word Google. If it's something specific I'm searching for, I remember it has an attachment, and I think he sent it within last week, but I'm not quite sure. So that's how you can be very granular with your search using that drop-down menu. And I do know that we're after the 45-minute mark, so those of you who are hoping to jump off at that time, I apologize for the delay. However, we did get a bit of a late start, so we're almost wrapped up with Gmail. So please sit tight. And again, this session will be recorded in case you definitely have to jump off. Okay. Now, as the last topic within Gmail, I'd like to cover the ability to create your own personal contact group. So in order to do that, I'm going to start out by hitting the Compose button. That's going to pull up a new message window. And this personal contact group is really going to come in handy for those of you who find yourself reaching out to groups of people very frequently. And rather than typing out a whole list of people, so for instance, I'll just pick on some people I find in the webinar. Don't worry, I won't be spamming you with an email. Oh. Maybe, okay, Marty. Oh. There we go. Okay, so you see, trying to reach out to this group of 3 people took me a bit of time typing in their emails and selecting them manually. So if I am in a team, or maybe I have a project with these 3 people, I can save them off as a group for future reference and faster emailing going forward. So once you have the to line filled up with the people in the group that you want to reach out to on a regular basis, you can save them off as a group by clicking on that to just to the left. In that pop-up, you'll see a quick review of who's in your to line. That looks great. And at this point, I will click that Save as Group option and title my group, so the project team. I'll hit the Save button. Google said that group saved. Fantastic. I'll close this down. I'll discard my message. I'll refresh. We'll pretend it's a new day. And now, if I wanted to reach out to that team of mine, I can hit the Compose button And as I just type in the first few keystrokes to indicate the project team, you'll see Google is suggesting it. And if I give that a click, now everybody's email address is auto-completed for me in the to line. So that's how you can manage personal contact groups. And just as a last tip, if you decide to spin up your different contact groups, note that you can manage your groups going forward by clicking on the Mail drop-down in the upper left corner, selecting that Contacts option. And here under My Contacts, you can see the different groups that I've spun up in the past. And by using this three-headed person icon for groups, you can select which groups you'd like certain colleagues to be a part of. All right. So that does cover the basic introduction to Gmail and Google Contacts. So in order to be conscious of everybody's time, I'm going to hop over to Google Calendar and talk about a bit of what you can expect when it comes to scheduling. So again, feel free to type in any questions at any point. But from my inbox, I'm going to use the waffle in the upper right corner, the apps grid. Give that a click, select Google Calendar, and then our calendar is going to open up in a tab next to our inbox. Now, a quick introduction to Google Calendar. So it's a little bit different than Outlook, but there are some Outlook similar things that I'll show you today. And the first thing I'll do is start off with a navigation. Now, in your Google Calendar, you can see that my calendar is this blue color, and my events for the week are showing up in that same color. But below that, in the other calendar section, this is where you can view your colleagues' calendars within GCC. So if I wanted to see what Travis's schedule looks like for the day, or Patrick's, note that I can simply either search for them, so this is connected to the directory, or if I've already pulled them up, you can just click on their calendars. A color will be associated with them, and now I can see an overlapping view of their schedules. So that's how you can check when it's a good time to schedule a meeting with someone. Basically, any time that's not either my calendar color, theirs, is free for us to meet. Just to continue on, so again, in this navigation, you have the option to hit the Create Event button, but there are more ways to do that, and I'll be demoing those to you in just a minute. At the top of your calendar, you have a search bar. Just like in Gmail, you have a drop-down option in that search bar for advanced search settings. You have different views for your calendar if you'd like. And then you also have your calendar settings. So calendar settings are really worth exploring if you find your calendar is not behaving the way you expect it to. There's a lot of granular options there. So feel free to explore those in your own time. Now, lastly, on the topic of calendar, I am going to cover how you can create an event, invite guests, and book a room. Or actually not invite guests. And then Lisa, I see your question about sharing your personal Google Calendar. So does that mean you'd like to share your personal Google Calendar with your work email so that you have a combined view of the two? Aha! Lisa, that's a great question. If you don't mind hanging on till the end after I talk about the event, then I would be more than happy to talk about that. I feel like a lot of people would want to know that. Perfect. Okay. So to talk about an event, as I showed you, if I'm checking out my colleagues, if I want to have a meeting with them, I'd first highlight their calendar. And then looking at our Friday schedules, it looks like Travis, Patrick, and I all have some time. We're all pretty free Friday afternoon. At this point, I could click the Create Event button. I can single click on a time slot or click and drag if it's a longer meeting. Or my favorite option is you can double click on your favorite time slot and then you can pull together your event. So I'll just title this. I can confirm the date and time I've selected. So in this case, I want to extend this to an hour-long meeting. And then below that is where you have most of your options for spinning up your event details. For my guests, I'll just add Patrick and Travis since I had already checked out their calendars. The rooms option is still not available, so rooms to book. Maybe one of you at GCC could speak to any progress on bookable rooms.
Yeah, this is Patrick. We're still putting that together, so that will be in here available soon.
Okay, excellent. Now, by default in Gmail, it's going to be very hard to double book rooms. So on the bright side, at this particular time I've selected, once the rooms are available to you and visible, know that your rooms will only display if they are indeed free at that certain period of time. So it's impossible actually to double book something in Google. So just a note for the future. Now that I have my guests picked out, note that in addition to the way of viewing their calendars overlapping, there are two other methods for checking their available time right from in this very window. And one of them is very similar to Outlook, and that's this Find a Time option. If I click on the Find a Time option, you'll see our calendars are lined up side by side. And using this blue bar, I can now drag this bar around to another time that maybe suits all of our schedules. Friday's pretty free, so it doesn't have to change, but the time will adjust at the top. I can include a description, etc. But now that my event's good to go, I'm going to hit Save. Google's going to ask to send invitations to my guests, so I hit Send. This is going to send an email notification out to both Patrick and Travis, letting them know that I've invited them to something, and you'll see this invitation is now reflected on their calendars. And lastly, as the event organizer, now that I've sent this invitation out, if I give this a click, I can even review how my guests have RSVP'd so far. So Travis and Patrick haven't gotten back to me yet, so their names are in gray. But if they had said yes, they can attend, then their names would be in black font. And if they couldn't attend, then their names would be crossed out. So that is essentially, actually Patrick, both of them said they could go, so maybe I'll go now and be polite. Perfect. So that wraps up the introduction to Google Calendar, also Gmail and Google Contacts. So Lisa, your question is coming up next. However, those of you who are interested in sticking around for a more personalized or tailored one-on-one session with me, feel free to stick around. I'd be happy to answer your questions. Okay. So with that, note that the content, the scripted and pre-planned content of this webinar is complete. Feel free to go about your day. But so Lisa, next I'll talk to you about how you can combine your personal Gmail account with your work email account or calendar. And I should say calendar for both of those. All right, Lisa, so the first step which you'll do is actually you'll start off from the perspective of your own personal Gmail. I know it seems counterintuitive, but you'll just make sure to be signed into your own personal Gmail. And then the step that you'll take is once you're in Google Calendar, it has to do with sharing your personal Gmail calendar with your work GCC calendar. So to do that, from Google Calendar in your personal account, you'll hover over your calendar name. So this will say your own name, Lisa. Click on the drop-down arrow, and then you'll see an option to share this calendar. For the most part, from your personal account, you will have the option of sharing this calendar with others, but the part that will be important to you is here. You will want to share your personal calendar with your GCC Tech LLC work account. So you'll type in your name. It may not appear in the drop-down if you don't have your work account saved off in your personal account's contacts. But so you can include that here, and at this point you can toggle between different calendar permissions. So if you just want to see what you're up to in your personal calendar from your work calendar, Then see all event details should be fine for you because it means you can see the title of your events on your personal calendar, you can see where you'll be, etc. If you would like to manage your personal calendar from your work calendar, then you can do one of these two top permissions, which has to do with making changes to events. So moving around things on your personal calendar, deleting things, RSVPing to events on your personal calendar, or manage sharing, which actually, to be honest, is not probably that relevant. It means then from your work account, you'll have the ability to share your personal calendar with other people, which is probably not going to happen. So I recommend this permission. Once you hit save, your work account will get an email to it saying, Lisa's personal Gmail account has given you permission. Oops, I will remove you actually. And then at that point, you're going to have access. And that means that once you're again logged into your work GCC account, you're going to be able to search for Lisa at Gmail, and then your calendar will be pulled up and you'll be able to have overlapping visibility, much in the same way as I can view Patrick's calendar overlapping with mine. You'll then be able to see your work calendar in one color and your Gmail calendar in another color. Hopefully that helps. Oh, and then for those of you who might have run into issues yourself with preview pane, Marty actually gave a nice update before he had to jump. He was able to find preview pane by just closing the browser and then signing in, signing out again, and refreshing. And then he was able to see this icon for preview pane. So for those of you struggling with that, do know. Okay. So for those of you who are still in the session, such as Kamaria, Kirshia, Lisa, Nick, Delano, Darcel, Daniel, and Daisy, feel free to continue asking questions, as I am happy to stick around until 10:30 Eastern. If other people's calendars are shared with my personal calendar, like my kids' calendars, will they show up too? That's a great question, and no. In that case, you will have to ask your kids to share their calendars with your work calendar as well. So another way that you could do that, yeah. Do you think your kids would be comfortable with that? Because I do have a workaround in mind if not. So they would have to go through the same process with their own calendars, share their calendar with your Lisa at GCC email address. So the workaround is, let's see. Okay, so from your personal account, this is a bit of what's it called, a tangent from work-related things, but let's say that you are on your personal calendar. Let's pretend this is your personal Gmail, and then these are your kids' calendars, which you can typically view. Okay, oh, thanks, Daniel. Daniel's heading off. So when you're viewing your kids' schedules, so Patrick is the kid in this case, you are going to be able to bring over their events to your calendar, your personal Gmail calendar, by copying them to your personal calendar. So you can just copy over your kids' activities onto your calendar. So now even when I deselect my kids' calendars, you have evidence of their event. Which means if you just make your personal calendar reflective of your kids' events as well by copying those events, then your work calendar, which of course has access and visibility into that calendar, should be reflective of those two, so your events and your kids' events. Does that make sense? So you just click on that third party's event and then you copy to my calendar. Yes, as long as they haven't updated them. That's a great point. And yes, Patrick, I was planning on doing that and keeping the recording running so that she can view those later. Perfect. I'm glad that helped, Lisa. Okay. So until there are any other questions that come in dynamically, I have received a few questions from Mayel. Just want to make sure that's correct. So let me take a look at some of those questions. Okay. So one of the questions that had been asked is, are notifications not supported on anything except for Chrome? So actually that is incorrect. It will work in Firefox, Safari, Internet Explorer, whatever you might be working on. And the options for you to have notifications, I'll first cover Gmail. So that's going to be a notification every time you receive a new message in your inbox. You'll click on the settings gear, go down into settings, and then in the general settings tab, you're going to see this desktop notifications option. So feel free to turn that on. And then once you save, the next time a new message lands in your inbox, you're going to get a little fade in, fade out reminder or notification that you have some new mail. So that's in any browser. And then switching over to Google Calendar, if you are concerned about getting notifications for your events, the default notification for all events is a 10-minute reminder. You can see that there's actually an indication when you hover over an event that a notification is in place. But it's a 10-minute, before an event starts, a 10-minute reminder with a pop-up. And that pop-up is going to freeze any and all tabs you have open in that browser. So if I was on google.com searching for something else, my calendar would actually freeze all my tabs, force me to come back to calendar and acknowledge the pop-up. So if 10 minutes before the event is not your favorite notification setting, they have migrated over from your preferences in Outlook. But to change them, you can hover over your own calendar, select that drop-down arrow, and then go to the Edit Notification section. You'll see here that you can toggle and customize your edit notifications as you'd like, and you can actually add up to 5 individual notifications to apply to each event, and these can be either email notifications and really any increment of time. So you can be very notified if you'd like. So feel free to set those up. And then another thing to double check is if you have these boxes selected. So this means at this point, I'm going to receive a lot of email updates when there are new activities on my calendar relating to new invitations, updates, cancellations, and RSVPs. So again, this works on all browsers. All right. Still no new questions coming in, so I'll just proceed. How can we categorize and mark emails for follow-up in Gmail? For example, something similar to the flag option in Outlook. Perfect. Okay, so this takes us back into Gmail. Now, yes, that brings up a great point because in Gmail, there's nothing similar to what Outlook had as that red flag. In fact, on one note, actually, should I turn off my webcam? Yeah, I'll turn off my webcam in case this is taking up too much space. So if you had red flags applied in Outlook before, then they have been converted and migrated over as stars. So you might have some messages that have stars applied to them, and that's basically the Google version of flags. However, one thing to note, and a primary difference between stars and flags, is that stars are really for your eyes only. So if you have stars applied to messages and then you forward a message to someone or you reply to it, the other person will not see evidence of that star. Google gives each person the option to star and unstar their own particular messages. So when it comes to marking things for follow-ups, you are left to your own options for your workflow. So one thing you could use is, indeed, you could use a star. So if you need to get back to certain people throughout the day, feel free to just click on that star silhouette. And then it's your own invented workflow that anything with a star means that you have to get back to that person for the day. And you can always review your starred messages in groups by clicking on the starred label. But there are also many other options. For example, my personal method is to use labels. So I have a to-do label in my inbox. And as I go through the day, typically I color code this red to be brought to my attention. As I go through the day, for instance, now I have 4 unread messages. I know that I can't get to them now, but if I wanted to later, I would apply the to-do label. And then I deselect them. So now when I'm looking in my inbox, I have a big red alert saying you got to get back to these people. Or I can periodically check the contents of my to-do label throughout the day. And as I interact with these messages, say get back to Patrick, I'll just simply X out of that to-do label and my to-do list actually shrinks. So again, these are all just invented workflows or suggestions, but hopefully this is leaving you with an impression that Google is extremely flexible and you can tailor it to whatever workflow makes the most sense for you. Last but not least, to just talk about stars in a bit more detail, clicking on the settings gear and going into settings, in the general settings section, you can control the types of stars you use pretty granularly. So by default, you only have 1 star in use, it's the yellow star, but Gmail also has some exclamation marks on hand as well as a check mark. So if you wanted to use some particular icons for your own invented workflows, you can just drag them up into that in use bar, hit save when you're done. And now, clicking through on 1 star, you can cycle through all those stars you've just selected. This brings me to another topic of workflows. Now I'm continuing on because I noticed there aren't too many questions coming through. Please feel free to interrupt me at any point with your own questions, should you have them. But I'm also going to address a question that came up that said, I'm having trouble seeing messages that I've replied to. So in Outlook, there was an easy way to see when I replied to a message, so it was time-stamped in a way. So how can we recreate that in Google? Now, first and foremost, note that it is different and slightly more difficult in Google to see those messages that you've replied to. I mean, perhaps most obviously, and I'm sure you all know, that in your sent mail, of course, you can review messages that you've sent and when, and to who. So if you click on them, and then you view this little drop-down arrow, you're going to be able to see that it was sent from you at this particular time. But as for a visible indicator, I'd say that there are a few things you could do. First and foremost, I've seen some people use the green check arrow for messages that they've replied to. So once you get back to somebody, you might want to manually apply that check. Another thing I've seen people do is going into settings. If this is a major point for you, that's another use case for turning conversation view off. Because with conversation view turned off, you have a bit more information about which messages under a subject line have been sent from you and which associated with a subject line have been sent to you from others. So it's a bit easier to see visually, so I'll turn this off and then save it. And now you can see from your inbox which messages have been sent to you from people. And in your sent messages, you have all the messages that you've sent to others. So now they're more split. They're not grouped up together under one subject line. So hopefully that's a little bit easier for you to differentiate. Another option that you can do to continue on, because again, please feel free to type in your questions, is a method that would automatically apply all messages that you've responded to with some sort of replied to indication. Now that touches upon talking about filters. And filters are Google's version of what Outlook called rules. So for those of you who used to work with rules, or maybe you didn't know they went by that name, that's the method of once you get a message in your inbox, you want to apply some automatic actions to it or automatically organize it. For example, every time I get a message from Patrick, I want to automatically usher that into a Patrick label. Another example is every time I reply to a message, I want to apply a star. So those are some filters for an example, and you can create a filter together with me if you'd like by either selecting an example message to start. So I can use that example with the Patrick scenario. So messages from Patrick put into a Patrick label automatically. I'll select this message as a starting point. I'll use the More dropdown to filter messages like these. And then just because I had picked out an example message from Patrick, it's smart enough to put his email address in the From area. Right now, I can set my criteria in this box. So right now, without doing anything else, my criteria is capturing all messages from Patrick, which is indeed what I want to capture. But note, you could do even more specific things, like maybe you want to capture all messages from Patrick that contain the word training. You know, feel free to explore. But once your criteria is set, as mine is right now, I'll hit Create Filter with the search. And then to usher mail directly into a Patrick label, I will at least select the action of applying a Patrick label. And I didn't have one before, so I'm going to spin one up on the fly. I'll hit Create. Now, just because I know Patrick is important, I'll quickly color code this into something easy and eye-catching, so maybe dark blue. Okay, great. Then I'll continue on with my filter. And in addition to making sure that this email goes into the Patrick label, I also had said that I don't want it to land in my inbox. So in order to achieve that action of just automatically going straight to the Patrick section, I will also click Skip the Inbox. These two actions combined are going to move any incoming mail from Patrick directly into that Patrick section, but this ticker on my inbox will not go up. Instead, I'll see an unread message from Patrick. This will turn bold, and I'll see a little 1. Last but not least, as you set up your filters, do know that this is probably the most important box that you can check, because for those of you with months and years of historical mail, Google is going to look through your mail, so your inbox, all of your labels, and all mail, basically everything but trash and spam, in order to find messages that match your criteria to which it could apply your actions. So Google's already found 3 matching messages from Patrick, and it's offering to move them out of my inbox and into the brand new Patrick label. So that would be great. I'll hit Create Filter. Now you'll see that in my inbox there is nothing anymore from Patrick. But looking in the Patrick label, what do you know? There's 2 unread messages here. And there you have all those mails from Patrick. As for the filter with the reply example, you can also create a filter from using the advanced drop-down. So I'm going to use this for another method of creating a filter. And at this point, since I'm from my SADA trainer account, my criteria are messages that are from me. So that's messages I've replied to, and contain the subject line RE, indicating that I've replied. I'm going to create a filter with this search. You can see Google's found, I guess I haven't done much mailing or replying. So it said it's found 1 matching message. And at this point, I have some options. So I could either star it, if that's my favorite workflow, or I could apply a brand new replied to label. So I'm going to create a filter for that. And now, all the messages that I've replied to are going to be automatically included in this replied to label. And one extra pro tip is, because this is really like a clean version of sent mail, it's splitting up messages that you forwarded, sent for the first time, and replied to, that's sent mail, but this is more a little specific. You can tidy up your label list if you know you're just going to check this maybe once a week. You can hide this label in your label list. So it's beyond the More drop-down. You have a bit more space here, but you know that you can always find it and view it when you're ready. Okay. So again, but again, please don't do any label reorganizing until after the migration is entirely done. Thank you for bringing that up, Patrick. Yes, you don't want to twiddle with your labels until the migration is completely done. Otherwise, you might end up with some funky data issues. But yes, that is a great point. This is everything you can do, but just hold your horses, not quite yet. All right, 4 minutes to spare in our 90-minute session. And I can continue going through some of these questions unless you have your own specific ones. Let's see. Okay, one of the questions has to do with, is there a way to make Gmail the default program when sending an email? For example, in Word, when you click on Save and Send and click the Send as an attachment, it defaults to Outlook. How can you change that? So that's actually a great question. I wanted to talk about this because, Patrick, I might turn that around to IT, because that would be a function of a Microsoft product in that case, so Word. And I'm not surprised at all that Word wants to work with Outlook, so I'm not even sure if it's going to be an option to switch to Gmail. However, that probably is going to touch upon somebody who's more of an expert in Microsoft products, so I can't speak to that. But on the bright side, last but not least, another question she had asked is, in Outlook I had various notes with standard language that I copy and paste into various systems and use them on a regular basis. What is similar in Google? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is where canned responses comes in handy. So clicking on the settings here in settings, if you remember, in the Labs tab, scrolling all the way to the C section, canned responses is Google's version of email templates. So I've enabled that. And now scrolling all the way to the very bottom and saving, I will introduce this to you. So for those of you who have those notes or emails that you send repeatedly and just tweak slightly, there's a six-step process for creating canned responses. Hopefully you can follow along with me. So step 1 is easy. Just feel free to click on that Compose button so you pull up the new message window. This is our slate. Step 2 is to actually delete everything in the new message window. So that's to create a blank slate. Step 3 is to write out your canned response. Something kind of cheesy. I used to be in sales, so that's what salespeople would send all the time. Maybe you want to include a little indication to yourself that you have to customize certain sections. So don't forget to tailor this to the actual person you had been speaking with. Anywho, once you've created the email template, then step 4 is to select the drop-down arrow in the lower right corner of the new message window. Hover over canned responses and save it as a new canned response. Hit enter or OK. Now your canned response has been saved, so I'm going to actually delete that, close it down, refresh. And in order to show you how to use it, you can click the Compose button, write to John Doe or whoever it may be, and then clicking in the body of your message window, use the drop-down arrow in the lower right corner, hover over canned responses, and then under that gray word insert, you can select your canned response. And it auto-completes. All right. So I do believe that covers most of the questions Feel free to send me any other questions that you have. So my email address is in the staff field for GoToWebinar. But also, one last point is IT will post on the help page instructions for setting up the default mail handler in different browsers. And as far as things like Word, they're going to look into the Word and Gmail interusability, and then they'll let you know when they find an answer for that. So they're going to post all these updates on the help page. All right. Okay, so Daisy, Darcel, Heather, Kershia, Lisa, and Nick, thank you so much for attending today's session. I hope you found it useful. And Patrick, thank you so much for helping co-facilitate, despite your sick, your flu. But it was a pleasure. All right. So I'm going to stop recording then, and we're going to end the webinar. So I hope you all have a great day and take care in that storm.
Thanks, you too, Nina.
And thank you very much, Nina, for everything you've done for us. All these webinars have been tremendous, and all the time you put into preparing it just for GCC, it makes it feel like we're your only customer. So thanks for all your help.
Oh, no problem. You guys are fabulous. And feel free to email me if you need any other help or questions addressed. Okay.